right. Thanks for tuning in for another week of the Kentucky Pharmacist Podcast. We are joined this week by KPhA member and pharmacist Amber Cann. Amber, you want to get us started maybe with a little intro and bio and information about yourself?
Yeah, hello. Thank you for inviting me. I can't believe it, but I have been a pharmacist now this year for 25 years, which blows my mind. I'm a UK grad, and I have worked in a lot of different settings. This is a new field for me. I always enjoyed working in the sort of the top of my license, but a few years ago I saw that medical cannabis was on its way in Kentucky, as it has been for many other states, and I wanted to be on the forefront. So I was intrigued by cannabis for a lot of different reasons from a scientific standpoint. So I decided to start a master's program at the University of Maryland College of Pharmacy. Just completed that about a year ago, last April. So that I know of, I'm the only pharmacist in Kentucky that has master's level training in cannabis therapeutics and science.
And that's why we're lucky to have you with us today. So, obviously January 1, right, was the date whenever, the medical cannabis program started in Kentucky. Maybe if we could start with a kind of a high-level overview of where we are in that process. I mean, I think people have heard about it, but certainly we haven't seen any dispensaries open. But I'll let you, the expert, kind of fill us in on where we are.
Yes, so January 1st, that's right. Patients could start to sign up and get registered in the program. They have to see a cannabis provider. That means that their provider has to be trained with at least 6 hours of initial training and register with the Kentucky Cannabis Program here. And get all of that paperwork done. There's some paperwork that has to be done to get them registered in the program. They have to qualify, and that is determined by their cannabis provider under a number of qualifying conditions set by the legislature. That started January 1st. So yes, you're right in that there are no dispensaries open. The licenses for producers and growers they were awarded to those businesses kind of late in the year last year. I want to say October. So once those licenses were awarded, of course, those people have to get a lot of infrastructure taken care of. You can't get seeds in the ground. So it's going to take a while before dispensaries open. I'm going to say optimistically, perhaps June or July before we see dispensaries in Kentucky with products on shelves. But in the meantime, patients can get qualified and get a medical cannabis card.
Awesome. And I mean, so, at one point in my career, I had a CBD company and saw, just the relief that those products provided to patients, and most of them had some small amount of THC in them. But so I mean, I guess turning to the clinical aspect as a pharmacist, like help people that may be on the fence about this or questions regarding stigmas. Can we maybe address some of those for patients or for pharmacists that will begin to see patients starting to use this program? It may be later in the year, but
yeah. Oh, sure. I think that a lot of people, pharmacists included, when they hear something about cannabis, when they hear about medical or marijuana, even medical marijuana, they may have stigmas that come along with that. They may have a certain type of patient in mind. However, and to be honest, I had those same sort of images in my head long ago. I worked a lot in the addiction medicine realm. And so I was seeing patients who were in recovery, and more of them were telling me that they were using cannabis, which was very verboten, along with their really abstinent only type of treatment plan that had been set out for them. And so that's what made me get interested in it to start with. But those types of patients ran the gamut of the type of people that you see benefiting from cannabis. And years ago, when I was curious, I was in another state and I just decided, okay, I'm just going to go to a dispensary, not to purchase anything, honestly, but just to see what it's like in there. That was an eye opener for me because I saw lots of different types of patients. I saw old people, young people. I saw lots of people that were seemed to be from various backgrounds, and it very much looked like a medical clinic waiting room when I was in there. So yes, I think the stigma that we come to this cannabis realm with is real, but we as pharmacists can definitely help dispel those pre-assumptions. And I'm hoping that as the pharmacist that's leading the information to other pharmacists, that I can help other pharmacists do that. Yes, definitely CBD is one of those things that is one of the cannabinoids that is in the cannabis plant. And those are products that can be sold in Kentucky. Not all states are legal CBD states. There is just a few holdouts. But in our state, because of the Farm Bill, we can have sales of products that have less than 0.3% THC. So that can, generally they are products that have a certain number or a certain milligram of CBD in the product. They range from oral tinctures to creams and lotions to gummies and lots of different dosage forms. I have various thoughts about those various dosage forms, as some of them are not as effective or not effective at all as far as getting the drug across the various membranes. But yes, CBD is one of those cannabinoids that is currently legal in Kentucky. And when medical cannabis is available in Kentucky, then THC, which is the typically psychoactive cannabinoid in the cannabis plant, it will be a product that's available in various dosage forms as well.
So touching a little bit on the regulatory side of things. So, we're here in Frankfurt, and this topic continues to churn up here. Interestingly, when this was all kind of going through in the past couple of years, we heard a lot of legislators like, well, I'm only going to support it if it's medical. At the same time, I'm getting phone calls from vendors like, hey, you can sell THC in pharmacies now. So, is there a place there for, like, some of these hemp derived, you can sell Delta 9, hemp derived Delta 9. It's already out there. Like, it's being sold in stores in Kentucky. Like, how should pharmacists kind of balance that of, well, I can sell some of these hemp derived products, and to your point, you can do 0.3%. We're all, mostly pharmacists can be listening to this, and we all know if you take 0.3% of 100 milliliters of something and take it all at one time, you can get 3 milligrams of THC from that dose, and then so on and so forth. So, like, how do you navigate between hemp-derived THC products that are technically legal in Kentucky versus a medical cannabis program, and why should we, or how can we best maybe steer patients one way or the other?
Right. Well, to start with, the legal framework for cannabis in this country is a big mess.
Yeah.
So let's just put that out there to start with. Unlike federal laws that mandate parts of our pharmacy practice, there's no such laws that govern cannabis, because at the federal level, cannabis, the plant, is still Schedule 1. And so that's defined, of course, by the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 as something that has no medicinal value. And so that's where we are federally. There are really no federal cannabis laws other than the Controlled Substances Act. However, we do have FDA approved cannabis derived medications. So there is some dichotomy there in that we do have the federal government on one hand saying, okay, there's no medical use for cannabis in any form that's derived from a plant, but yet we have some even plant derived medications that are approved by the FDA on the other hand saying, yes, there is medical use for cannabis.
And would that be Marinol? Is that
Yes.
an Epidiolex?
Epidiolex, yes.
Okay.
There's nabiximols, which is something that is currently not available in the U.S., but it is in current FDA approval process and is available in, I think, 26 countries, non-U.S. countries in Europe. It's available as an oral spray. It's a plant-derived 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD, and it's generally used for spasticity related to MS and other types of conditions like that. And then we have a brand named Sesamet, which is also a THC analog. And I'll say that dronabinol is a synthetic THC, not derived from the plant.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
So we have cannabinoids that are already on the market that pharmacists are dispensing. And so one part of the government is saying, yes, these are FDA approved medications. And yet the other side of the street is saying they have no medicinal value. Now that's on the federal level. And then when we get to the state level, that they're even more conflicting. So each state that has a cannabis program, medical cannabis program, has different laws that govern patient eligibility, purchase limits, dosage forms that are available, and the state laws that on cannabis just are very different from pharmacy law. Generally, we know that pharmacy law differs somewhat from state to state. But for the most part, we can, navigate those. But cannabis laws are wildly different from state to state. So I'll just throw that out there as part of the complexity. Now, to your question about the difference between legal THC or hemp-derived cannabis versus other non-hemp derived or just the cannabis plant. So yes, there are products that are available now sort of as a loophole through the Farm Bill that they take the hemp-derived product, they work it through lots of chemical processes, and they create a analog or a similar product, Delta 8, that is enough like Delta 9 that it reacts in the same way as THC, what we typically think is plant-derived THC. It's not as, it doesn't have as much affinity for the cannabinoid receptors in the endocannabinoid system, and it doesn't bind as tightly, and so it tends to not be as a strong effect. However, if you've heard the phrase it's close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades, that's kind of how I think of the hemp-derived Delta 8 products.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I will say that I get a lot of questions from people who are in jobs that require them not to test positive for CBD, or I'm sorry, for THC. So lots of CBD stores are selling non-THC or zero THC products. And while that is, while that is a good place to start, lots of places of employment will use screening tools or screening tests that don't differentiate in the cannabinoids. So that person could have purchased a non-THC product. Well, two things here. They could have purchased a non-THC product, and yet their screening tool that their employer is using is not differentiating between THC and CBD. Then the other side of that coin is there's not a lot of oversight in the lab testing and a lot of analysis. And so, yes, on the label, it may say that there's no THC, but actually there might be enough that is discernible, even with a different test that differentiates between the various cannabinoids.
So much of that where people are, the quality assurance is huge, and
Oh yeah.
like it's I think still the wild west out there of, what lab are you using? Are they using the right, did they pull a sample, or are they putting a lot number? Like, especially early on, right? People were just going out and you'd get one lot that tested right, and you just label all your, it was crazy.
Yeah.
So back focusing back on the medical marijuana side, what are some best practices, and I'll, to tee it up a little bit, like what we're hearing from folks is I need education on the clinical side. I need, um, like, from a regulatory standpoint, what is my obligation?
Mm-hmm.
One question we still don't know the answer to that you may know is, you know, there's a Casper-like system that's required. Our pharmacist going to have access to that, and I still don't have a clear answer to that. I don't know if you do or not.
Yes.
But what is the pharmacist's responsibility there, to screen patients, and from to just professional development to educate ourselves on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think first and foremost, every pharmacist is incumbent upon them to take care of our patients, and I would treat it no differently than a over-the-counter medication. A patient comes to you and says, "I'm taking this supplement." It's not, maybe it's something that you don't know a lot about, but you have resources, or you should keep resources that you trust, that you can look up that particular supplement. Um, I encourage pharmacists to ask patients about their cannabis use, because I remind pharmacists that you do have patients who are currently using cannabis. All pharmacists do, and have had patients who are using cannabis for quite some time. They haven't felt comfortable with sharing that with pharmacists, but that needs to change. So I think first and foremost, pharmacists need to feel comfortable asking patients, just like we ask patients about their tobacco use and their alcohol use. That will help reduce the stigma related to cannabis use, but also it's good information to have, because there are many, many drug interactions that are at play. I hear from pharmacists, okay, well, if a patient tells me that they're using cannabis and I know all of their medications because I have their patient profile in front of me, but I don't know anything about their drug information or their drug interactions with what they have, well, now I'm liable. So some pharmacists have said, I don't want to ask about cannabis because la 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 la. I want the earmuffs on. I don't want to be responsible for counseling on something because I don't know enough about it. Well, that wouldn't fly with any other medication. You can't just sort of ignore an entire drug class just because you don't know anything about it. So this is a product that is available in 39 states and DC at this point. So it's not something that's a trend. It's not something that is going to be a niche product or service that is only for, something that a few patients are going to be taking advantage of. This is a huge, this is potentially a huge part of your patient population. So I think that all pharmacists need to educate themselves about the basics of cannabinoids and have resources available to them that they can have at the ready to look up when they have patients ask questions.
And I'll plug a couple of educational things I think you're working on. I know we're working or already have published some education on this. So it hopefully by the time we get this live, we can get those going. But outside of KPhA as a reference, is there any like gold standard for pharmacists to go out and get education on this?
Yeah, there are CEs out there. There one that's not a CE activity, but actually is something that I trust quite a bit is there's a felon out of Maine. His name is Dustin Sulak. You spell his name Sulak. He's a DO physician, and he has some training on his website. I think you can just Google him or follow him on his socials. But he has a lot of good clinical information on cannabis for clinicians. He's actually published a book, Cannabis for Clinicians. So actually, let me check the name for that. The name of the book is Cannabis for Clinicians, and his name is Dustin Sulak. So that is a great reference to just have at the ready. And then there are good CEs out there. The University of Maryland College of Pharmacy, the place where I went to get my master's program, they put out good CEs. So if you want a CE activity and you want it to relate to cannabis, then those are two places that you can look at. And then, of course, KPhA, which I'm working with KPhA to develop that as well.
Looking forward to that. And I think you've done a couple programs for us that have got awesome reviews from our meetings. So I appreciate having an in-house expert as well. So, and on Casper, have you heard anything different?
Yes. Yes. So I did do a deep dive into all the regulatory framework, and you have to kind of go down several different avenues to read all the KARs and the KRSs. But yes, so dispensaries are required to record the amount of medical cannabis that is dispensed to a cardholder. And that is, would you like me to give you the actual KAR or regulatory reference?
Sure. Yeah.
I'll throw it out there in case there are some regulatory.
I should probably have that memorized, but I don't. So go ahead.
Yeah. So it's 915 KAR 1:070.
Okay.
And then there's also KRS 2188.140. And then I'll throw another one at you in a minute. But so based on those two, it says that the amount of medical cannabis has to be recorded that's dispensed to a patient, and that information is subject to reporting to the Casper. And then there's another one, KRS 218A.202S. And that one says specifically, I'll quote it, it says an electronic system for monitoring schedules 2, 3, 4, and 5 controlled substances and medical cannabis. So there was some back and forth about whether cannabis was going to show up on the Casper. I think it kind of, there was discussion of whether it should or not. I certainly am a proponent of it showing up on the cannabis or on the Casper. But yes, our regulatory framework says that indeed it will show up on the Casper report. And of course, pharmacists have access to that.
Good deal. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I guess we'll confirm that whenever the first dispensing start happening. Yeah. And KPHA's position, we fought to get pharmacists included in this process, and I think it's from a public health standpoint. If we're going to call this, if this is being treated like medicine, pharmacists should have been involved either in dispensing. The big marijuana lobbyists obviously don't want that because they can pay somebody less than a pharmacist to run their shops. So we had settled on they need to have a consultation. Made it through the House version, both bills, didn't get to the finish line. And I think, we didn't get a ton of engagement from the pharmacist community on that. But in hindsight, I think we're going to look back at some point and realize that there's a public health implication there, because that it's another safeguard that we put in place for our patients. So knowing that that's not a requirement, I think that even calls for pharmacists to be more proactive in those in the ask of, we're doing med recs or whatever to make sure that we're providing the best care for our patients.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was very excited to see in the 2022 bill that a pharmacist played a key role in that process. And it just it passed the House, and then it sat on the Speaker's desk in the Senate, and it didn't get anywhere. So I heard from people that said they were opposed to it because it would add cost, and I just wanted to shake my fist at the sky and say, well, think about the costs that you could avoid of drug interactions and hospitalizations and I mean
Misuse, diversion. Yeah, I mean, all the things that pharmacists do today, on other controlled substances, and you're taking that critical step out. So, we'll see and continue to monitor this as you've seen in other states. You know, the companies that are leading these efforts don't always necessarily have the best interest in public health. Their job is to sell more cannabis. So um, we'll see where they go. I've been told that they're already asking for recreational, so that's next. But we have just a few minutes left here, so we'll wrap up with any comments or last thoughts, advice from the expert in the room.
All right. Well, one thing I do want to put out there is I did mention the handbook of Cannabis for Clinicians by Dustin Sulak, another good resource for drug interactions, because I know that's going to be a key question that pharmacists get. It comes out of Penn State. And the address, I promise it wasn't named after me. I do have a very fortuitous last name, but the address is Cann, CANN -dir.psu.edu. And so that's from Penn State. That is a drug information website database specifically for cannabis drug interactions. So I think every pharmacist should bookmark that, have it at the ready, and it is excellent. It's an ever-growing list. Of course, the more that we're able to study cannabis, the more that we're able to answer these questions about drug interactions and the clinical implications of those interactions. Now the question of will cannabis be rescheduled, we could have a whole other podcast about that. But
stay tuned. There will be changes, so
yes, the process is underway, I suppose.
That's correct.
But I have mixed feelings about that. But if it's rescheduled, then we can properly study it. I'll just say that. And I'm a big fan of being here for the science. So the other thing I would just say is that there is a realm where pharmacists and pharmacies can have income stream and differentiate themselves in the cannabis space. Pharmacists that I talk to sometimes say, well, if it's cannabis related, it's C1, I don't want to deal with it. But I think innovative pharmacists can see this as a opportunity. So with the opioid settlement, with the U.S. Justice Department a few years back, there could be avenues that pharmacies can shift into consulting or revenue in the cannabis space. I know that CBD sales have been in the billions of dollars, and so a lot of pharmacies are seeing that already as a revenue source. There's actually an insurer that is covering cannabis-related medicine. It's called Novus Cannabis Med Plan. So insurance companies, of course, generally do not cover anything related to cannabis because of its federal C1 status, but some insurers are starting to lead the charge in covering cannabis medication. So pharmacies could possibly partner with these insurers and draw patients into their stores by offering that service and then getting reimbursement for cannabis related activities. So I think it's a great place for a pharmacist to be, because this is a whole new world of medication that patients are interested in, that the public is honestly, the public opinion of cannabis has turned the tide. It's past the tipping point now. And it's high time that pharmacists take the rein and lead the charge on this, on the place where a lot of other clinicians are falling down.
High tide. I see what you did there.
I didn't.
I caught you.
Nope, I really was, no pun intended. But thank you.
Awesome. Well, I again thank you so much for joining us today and really sharing your expertise today, and you were always so gracious with your time, and we are so appreciative of your effort to help educate Kentucky pharmacists, and I'm sure you're educating pharmacists all over the country, but from KPhA standpoint, again, just want to acknowledge our appreciation for your efforts. So thanks again for joining us, and as you said, these things are changing, so we'll have to bring you back sometime for an update later on this year.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. Stay tuned. There's a lot more to come.
All right, thanks.